Welcome back. In this video, we'll see how to use the inheritances with the Universal Stats and Attribute System plugin. So first, we're gonna make a new folder for our stats related to health that we created in the previous video. So I'm gonna create a new folder called Health System and put those three stats in here. We're gonna create a new stat called Constitution and make our health max inherit from this stat. So right-click blueprint class stats, and we're gonna call it Constitution. Right. So now we can open health max and drag inheritances. We can make an array, and if we drag this pin, we have two options, a basic inheritance or a curved inheritance. For this one, we'll use a basic inheritance. So here we have a mode which allows you to have different inheritances depending on the stats component this stat is in. So if you take, for example, the character that we have here, third-person BP blueprints, third-person character, we created a stats component which doesn't have any mode. But if you had different characters with different stats components, you could, for example, create multiple inheritances. One that could work for a warrior, for example. You could call it warrior component, and a second one for a wizard, for example, wizard component. And in here, if I typed warrior, for example, warrior component, only this inheritance would work inside this stats component. This allows you to have different behaviors for the same stats depending on the stats component they are in. But for now, we'll just leave it blank. And if you want your inheritance to work for any stats component, you need to type in all, like that. Now we can set the parent stat. So this stat, health max, is gonna inherit from Constitution. And here we can select the ratio. So if we put 10, for example, the value of health max will be its own personal value plus 10 times the Constitution. Of course, if we set health max to 0, if we set a base value of 0, it will always be equal to 10 times the Constitution. We can remove this pin, and that's basically it. We can now open Constitution because we didn't set its display name. So override getInit settings. I'm gonna call it Constitution. Now go back to your third-person character or whatever character you're using, and in your stats component, you can add the new stat Constitution, and it will start with a base value of 10. So here, as you can see, health max already has its own base value of 100. So it will be 100 plus 10 times the Constitution, so 100 plus 100. So here the value of health max will be 200. But we want health max to always be equal to 10 times the Constitution, so we will put the base value to 0. Alright, now we can compile and save. And in the previous video, we created this little display to see our stat values. And whenever we press V, we're gonna simply increase our Constitution by 1 and see how it goes. So now we can compile, save, and hit play. Now if I press C, we can see our stat values. So our Constitution is 10 and our health max is 10 times the Constitution, so 100. And now if I press V, now our Constitution is 11 and our health max is now 110. Alright. Now we'll see how to use curved inheritances, and for that I'm gonna create two new stats. The first one will be called Agility, and I duplicate it with Ctrl Z and call the second one Critical Rate. And I'm gonna make Critical Rate inherit from Agility using a curved inheritance. So I open critical rate and override getting it settings. I'm gonna call it critical rate. Now I can drag inheritances and make an array, and drag the pin and make a curved inheritance. So we can let the mode to all. The parent stat is going to be agility, and here as you can see it asks for a curve, so we're going to create a new curve. Go into miscellaneous and curve. We need to select curve float, and we'll call it critical rate progression. Now if I open it, as you can see, we have two axes, x and y. The x-axis is the value of the parent stat, and the y-axis is the value inherited. So if I right-click and add key, I'm going to add a new key to 0, 0. So whenever our agility is 0, our critical rate inherited is 0. And I can add a new key. I'll put it to 100. So whenever we have 100 agility, we're going to have 100 critical rate. And now we can simply set the shape of the curve. So if I select auto, if I select my key and set it to auto and do the same thing for the second key, now I can set the shape of my curve. So something like that, for example. So 100 agility is going to be a value that we won't really reach, but it's going to be the cap of our critical rate. So whenever we reach 100 agility, we're capped for critical rate. And as you can see, we have a nice progression. So for example, if we have 30 agility, we're gonna have 61.5 critical rate inherited. So we're gonna keep this curve. We can go back to our critical rate and simply use this curve, critical rate progression. You also have a ratio. If you have, for example, a same curve for different stats, you can also set the ratio. Alright, we can compile and save, and we'll quickly open agility, override getting settings and set its display name to agility. Now go back to your character, and inside your stats component you can add the two new stats, so agility and critical rate. We'll set agility to start at 10. Alright. And whenever we press V, we will increase our agility by 5. Alright, so now if we compile, save, and hit play, I press C to see our stats values, and as you can see, our critical rate is 24.7 because we have 10 agility. The critical rate is a bit high in my opinion, but of course the values are up to you to set up. If I press V, we increase our agility by 5, and as you can see, our critical rate goes up. And as I invest points into agility, the critical rate benefits less and less from it. And now I almost get no point, and when I reach 100, I reach also 100 for my critical rate, and if I go above 100, I won't have any point to my critical rate. Alright. That's it for this video. Of course, use these tools to make whatever you want. There are a lot of possibilities. Thank you for following this video, and see you in the next video.